In May of 2006, a young writer named Ray Rivera vanished from his Baltimore home. A week later, his body was discovered in a locked hotel room building under circumstances so strange that investigators still can't agree on what happened. Was it foul play or something far more mysterious? Today, we're going to look into the case of Ray Rivera, a man whose final moments remain one of the most chilling mysteries in modern true crime. Hi everyone, welcome back to This Case Takes Place. So for this episode, we're going to delve into the case of Ray Rivera. So this case takes place on the 24th of May 2006 in the Belvedere Hotel in Baltimore, America. Ray Rivera was born in Madrid, Spain, but he spent most of his childhood growing up in Southern California and Florida. After graduating from university in 1995, he went back to Spain for a while to play water polo when he was around 21. Ray returned back to California, where from 1998 to 2001, Ray coached high school level water polo in Burbank, California. By the time that 2004 rolled around, Ray was around 30 years old, stood at 6'5" tall, and was in great shape. According to those who knew him, he had a big personality and the kind of person that lit up every room he walked into. He was also deeply in love with his girlfriend Allison and had a real passion for screenplay writing. The only problem, screenplay writing didn't exactly pay the bills. Then, in 2004, an old high school friend named Porter Stansbury offered him a job. Porter had started a financial research company called Stansbury Research, which specialized in newsletters, stock tips, and investment advice. It was part of a larger company called Agora, which was based in Baltimore. Ray took the job in Baltimore and began writing a financial newsletter. Financial writing wasn't his dream, but he saw this as a way to save money for the future, especially to marry his then girlfriend, Allison. Things started off well in Baltimore. Ray and Allison bought a new home, joined a church, made new friends, and got busy planning their wedding. From November and December 2005, Ray's life had three major developments. He and Allison got married in Puerto Rico. A close friend and co-worker, Tom Hickling, died in a car accident while visiting his daughter in Africa, and Ray found the circumstances suspicious, but he never really opened up about why. But it appears that his friend's death deeply impacted him. And number 3, he left his job at Stansbury Research. After that, Ray took on a few new roles. He became an assistant coach for the men's water polo team at Johns Hopkins University, and he started focusing more seriously on his screenwriting. He also launched a small production company and was hired by several organizations. This company was called Sabre Productions. By spring of 2006, Ray and Allison were back in Los Angeles for a visit and started making plans to move there more permanently. But once they returned to Baltimore, strange and unsettling things began to happen. At that point, Ray was 32 years old. He and Allison had been married for 6 months and had lived in Baltimore for about a year and a half. They were planning their return to the West Coast, where Ray hoped to finally dive fully into his dream for writing movies. Ray had a lot going for him: a loving wife, a creative mind, a talent for storytelling, and a strong sense of loyalty for the people he loved. According to Allison, he wasn't the type of person who would just disappear without telling anyone, especially her. And yet, that's exactly what happened. Despite the good moments, those close to Ray said he wasn't happy in his job. He was still writing for a financial newspaper, and the stocks he was writing about weren't performing very well, and it seemed like the work left him feeling unsatisfied. By all accounts, he was ready for something new. But before any of that could happen, everything took a dark turn.
So, as the weeks went on in Baltimore, Allison started to notice something was off with Ray. He seemed anxious, on edge, and strangely protective. He wouldn't let her go anywhere alone. One day, she mentioned going for a run at the nearby track, and Ray insisted on going with her. While she was running, a man came onto the track and started walking in her direction. Before anything could happen, Ray leapt up from the bleachers, which in American terms is like the stands at football fields that they sit on, and sprinted straight towards the man. The man turned around and left immediately. Allison couldn't shake the feeling that Ray was scared of something. But just like with the death of his co-worker, Tom Hickling, he wouldn't talk about it. And then things got even stranger. In the early hours of Monday, May 15th, 2006, at around 1 a.m., their home security alarm suddenly went off. Allison woke up to the blaring sound and realized Ray was already out of the bed. The lights were still off as she made her way downstairs to see what was going on. Out of nowhere, Ray came around a corner holding a baseball bat. Ray was known to be fearless, but Allison could see something in his eyes she'd never seen before: pure terror. The police arrived shortly after and checked the property. Their conclusion was a squirrel must have triggered the alarm. By the next night, Tuesday, May 16th, at almost the exact same time, the alarm went off again. This time, Ray looked even more shaken than the night before. And this time, Allison noticed something. One of the windows in their living room looked like someone had tried to tamper with it, but from the outside. The police came again and once more blamed an animal. After that, the alarm went off again. Later that day, Allison's co-worker and friend Claudia came over to spend the night. She arrived sometime between 4 and 6:30 p.m. Ray was upstairs working in his office next to the guest room while Claudia relaxed nearby. At one point, Claudia heard Ray take a phone call. She couldn't hear much, just Ray answering, followed by him subtly yelling, "Oh shit." Can I say shit?
Yeah, you can say shit, yeah.
Within seconds, he grabbed his things and rushed out of the house wearing flip-flops. He left in Allison's black SUV. A short while later, he returned to the house briefly, then left again, still in the SUV. That was the last time anyone ever saw or heard from Ray Rivera. Allison tried calling Ray multiple times that evening, but with no answer. That was unusual. They called and texted each other every single day, especially if one of them was traveling. Still, Allison assumed maybe he'd gone out with some friends and could be home late. The next morning, Claudia, who was still at the house, called Allison before her flight to New York. She told her Ray never came home. The lights downstairs and in his office were still on. Concerned, Allison tried calling Ray again. Nothing. Now deeply worried, she cancelled her trip and drove straight back to Baltimore. Back at home, Allison immediately began contacting family and friends to ask if anyone had heard from Ray. No one had. When she arrived at the house, it was eerily the same as when she'd left. Ray's laptop was still on the kitchen counter. His Invisalign was still there. So was an open bag of chips and a sparkling water. It looked like he had stepped out for a minute but had never returned. That afternoon, she called the police to file a missing persons report. Before long, Ray's parents, his brother Angel, and his sister flew into Baltimore to help search for him. Allison's parents and the couple's close friends also came to help. The Rivera house quickly turned into search headquarters. It became a massive coordinated effort. Friends, family, co-workers, everyone tried to help find Ray, but there was no activity on his phone or credit cards. They canvassed neighborhoods, walked through Baltimore Street and parks, passed out flyers. Porter Stansbury, Ray's friend and former employer, offered a reward, hired a private investigator, and got the media involved. During the search, Porter told a reporter, Ray's a happy guy. He and his wife just booked a trip to New Mexico. This is not someone who wanted to disappear. I've got to find my friend. I can't imagine life without him. He's my best friend. Unquote. Unquote? End of quote? He said unquote? Ray's brother Angel told another outlet, quote, "It's completely out of character. Ray's the type of guy who would tell you where he's going, how he's getting there, and when he'll be back. For him to be gone this long without a word, ... everyone's scared." Unquote. End quote. Gosh. Should I just say that again? I keep saying
You
unquote.
can do fine, yeah.
Okay.
You can say unquote, though. Unquote's fine. I think unquote and unquote.
Josh, should I do it again? It was unquote fine.
Unquote. Unquote's the thing, I think. I think it's like American and English, two different things, isn't it?
Anyway, I'll keep going. Days went by. Hope began to fade. Then, on May 22nd, Allison's parents decided to drive around downtown Baltimore looking for Ray's SUV. By complete chance, they spotted it in a parking lot near the Belvedere, which is a historic 14-story building that used to be a hotel and was now home to apartments, bars, and restaurants. It was also located very close to Ray's workplace. The parking ticket showed the SUV had been parking there since May 16th, the night Ray ran out of the house after that mysterious phone call. Now, the search centered on the area around the Belvedere. 2 days later, on May 24th, 3 of Ray's co-workers went out during their lunch break to keep searching. They climbed to the top of a nearby parking garage that overlooked the extension of the Belvedere, essentially a second-floor rooftop area attached to the main building. From that height, something caught their eye. There on the rooftop below was a small, strange hole in the ceiling of the building. Around the hole were a few scattered items: 2 flip-flops, a cell phone, a set of keys, and a pair of eyeglasses. Uneasy, the co-workers called the police. When officers and police cadets arrived, they followed the trail to a conference room below the rooftop, a room that was rarely used. As soon as the door was opened, a terrible odor filled the hallway. Inside the room, sunlight beamed through the hole in the ceiling like a skylight, casting a spotlight on the floor below. There, under the hole, was a badly decomposed body of Ray Rivera. He had been there for over a week. By then, he was already badly decomposed, suggesting he'd been dead for quite some time.
When Ray's body was found on the 24th of May 2006, very few, if any, photographs of the scene were taken. Witnesses at the apartments that day claimed that they never saw the police collecting any fingerprints, nor did they see the police carefully handling Ray's belongings as evidence. Instead, they shockingly reported seeing officers casually tossing Ray's belongings down on through the roof hole while joking around. Even worse, police army cadets, essentially trainees, were allowed to wander freely through the room where Ray's body was discovered, potentially destroying evidence. The scene was left wide open, and the nearby hallway wasn't secured from the public. Investigators never even examined the parking garage next door, nor did they ever examine its security cameras. Investigators noticed a strange hole in the room's roof. Because of the presence of the hole in the room's roof, it led the police to conclude that Ray must have jumped from the hotel's rooftop, which was 14 stories high, crashing straight through onto the empty room below. Now, here's something that's quite eerie. Alison, his wife, later revealed that the initial lead detective advised her to be very cautious, implying certain people might not want Ray's true fate to be known. This detective was later transferred off the case. Despite this, the Baltimore Police Department maintains that Ray had done this of his own free will, and that nobody else was involved. So the former Baltimore Police Commissioner stated publicly that basically there was no one else involved and there was nothing criminal associated with Ray's death. However, friends, family, and multiple other people dispute this. Significant questions and inconsistencies remain with his death. So we'll start off with the first inconsistency. It seemed that Ray's death was staged. Ray's phone and glasses were found undamaged next to the hole. Police experts have expressed doubts about this scenario, calling it highly unlikely. Even stranger, there was no blood or human tissue found around the hole, something that would be expected from a violent 14-story fall. Furthermore, the initial detective on the case suspected that the scene was staged, believing the hole in the roof was suspiciously small and unlikely to have been made by Ray's falling body falling from such a height. Further, at the crime scene, Ray's wallet, a cherished keepsake he always carried, was never found. Keys, glasses, flip-flops and a cell phone were recovered, but not his wallet. Why was this personal item still missing?
I mean, your phone's currently smashed, and you probably dropped it from like a meter.
My phone smashed to bits. Where is it? Zoom in on that.
Absolutely,
I
Ray.
dropped this twice from like my knee height.
So that's something for me. You
Yeah.
know, how can a phone not be damaged in any way? Any of his personal belongings from such a high height.
I just realised phones were built different back then.
True.
We're
It's
talking
probably like a
we're talking
Nokia
about
brick.
Nokias, yeah.
Yeah,
as far as,
true.
yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
But 13 stories.
That's high.
Yeah.
Too high.
Yeah. And the hole being really small.
Yeah.
And he was a big boy.
Big
He was
boy.
like 6'2",
Mhm.
something like he was
6'5".
Yeah, exactly. So could you imagine a 6'5" dude, 13 stories high, falling through? You'd expect it to be a bit of a crater, if anything. But it
Absolutely.
was like quite a small hole, and then undamaged personal items like scattered
And no
around
blood.
the hole.
You'd expect like a
yeah,
blood spot.
yeah, something.
Yeah, something.
So a bit of DNA, a hair.
Mm.
And maybe it was there, and the police did such a shonky job that they never. But they said that no DNA was found, so they must have checked it.
There's no photographs of it either.
Yeah.
The police didn't take any photographs of it.
Yeah.
So.
Suspect.
Now, the next inconsistency, an engineering and forensic analyst concluded that Ray couldn't have simply been pushed. He would have had to have done a long run and then a leap off the rooftop at a speed of at least 11 miles per hour and jump approximately 45 feet horizontally to land where his body was found. Now, while this speed is achievable for a man like Ray, who was tall and athletic, there are doubts as to whether he could have done this, especially if he was wearing flip-flops. Now, one commenter on this case claims that the long jump world record set by a professional athlete in proper footwear is just over 29 feet. If true, authorities are suggesting that Ray shattered this world record while wearing flip-flops and jumping off a rooftop. Now, People in the comments let us know, if you jump off a rooftop, do you jump here and then keep going forward for a while? Or do you just start dropping due to weight? I don't know. I actually don't know.
Somewhere in between, but like they say, it's technically possible,
Mm.
but really unlikely. He was wearing flip-flops. Even though he was tall, he would have had to sprint all your might and then charge forward and then break a possible world record doing it. Like,
Strange.
I don't think, because you were saying, oh, it's definitely possible. I mean, technically a smidgen, but it's I think it's unlikely.
Well, let's know what you think about that, actually. I want to know in the
Yes.
comments. Yeah, it'll be interesting to read it. Here's the third thing. Ray was also very well known at this apartment hotel complex area. None of the employees who worked there, including those who knew him personally, reported seeing him on the 16th of May. Incredibly, the rooftop security cameras at this place were disconnected, or they conveniently malfunctioned on the 16th of May. Every night before Ray disappeared and after were completely fine. It was just on that one specific day.
So sus.
That's a tale as old as time.
Yeah.
Heard that one before.
Exactly. Which makes, okay, so instantly my conspiracy, like, nah.
Yeah, same.
Someone was involved. But then the hotel was either involved in some capacity or they were told to scrap it.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes sense. The lead investigator was like, by the way, just so you know, there might be people higher up who don't want you to actually know what happened. Like, come on. Police and the hotel, if like, because come on. In today's, that is not an accident that the one day that nothing was working.
It's like that other famous guy who died and the cameras just magically stopped working for a little bit of time.
Trump's friend.
Trump's best buddy. There's also another oddity in this as well, is that Ray was afraid of heights, yet he chose the method of, to end everything, he chose to jump from a tall roof.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people have said, why would someone so scared of heights choose their last moments on this earth to have their biggest fear, crash? People found that suspicious. I found that strange too. So just to summarize everything, Ray's belongings, included his glasses and cell phone, were found unbroken, which has left many people to raise doubts about the high-impact fall. No blood or tissue was found near the hole. Security cameras weren't working. Witnesses didn't see Ray even though they knew him, and his wallet was never found. Also, Ray was terrified of heights. So all these things lead to a lot of people believing that there's more to this story than the investigators have led on.
Sure.
And now we arrive to the autopsy controversy. The medical examiner's report stated that Ray's injuries were consistent with a fall from a height. The police investigators found no direct evidence of foul play or a struggle. Yet, despite these statements, Ray's official death was classified as undetermined. This ambiguous classification isn't unusual in Baltimore. It's not unusual in Baltimore, with around 20% of deaths labelled this way in 2006 alone, which is likely due to the city's overwhelming homicide rate. So with such high crime rates in the city, could Ray's death have fallen victim to this overloaded system?
So despite the official ruling of undetermined, Ray's wife Allison has long questioned the conclusion drawn by investigators. She revealed that an official from the medical examiner's office mentioned Ray had injuries inconsistent with a typical fall from such a height, specifically a severely broken shin. Marie Downheimer, which is a certified medical illustrator educated at Johns Hopkins University, also reviewed Ray's autopsy details and found troubling inconsistencies. Usually, victims who fall from great heights land feet first, resulting in severe foot and lower leg injuries spread evenly across the body. But Ray's injuries were oddly concentrated on his right side. Downheimer, who reconstructs crime scenes visually to help investigators, believes Ray's injuries resemble someone who had been beaten or struck by a vehicle rather than someone who fell. Though Downheimer acknowledges her expertise doesn't match that of medical examiners, she firmly believes Ray's death warrants further scrutiny. Supporting her findings, Miriam Moyer, who is an internationally recognized forensic expert specializing in biomechanics and accident reconstruction, also expressed doubt about the official narrative. Moyer highlighted the strange detail of Ray's broken flip-flop strap on his right foot, matching the severity of injuries predominantly on his right side, suggesting a violent impact or beating rather than a fall. So that's two experts saying it looks more like he was probably beaten up or hit by a car rather than a fall. Both Downheimer and Moyer argue for involving forensic engineers or biomechanic experts to re-evaluate the evidence. His toxicology report showed no drugs or alcohol in his system. So that leads us to the question, why would he do it to himself? What could possibly be the motive? So author Makita Brotman, who extensively researched the case for her book, quote, An Unexplained Death, argues that Ray likely suffered a psychotic break, which then led him to Ray doing it to himself. This is generally the position of the police as well. Ray's loved ones, however, strongly disagree. His family insists Ray show no signs of mental distress or unaliving tendencies. So Allison, his wife, never observed emotional instability. Ray's brother, Angel, found no unaliving notes or troubling writings in Ray's belongings. Angel even was quoted saying, "Not my brother." And he was obviously extremely skeptical of the unaliving theory. He said, "It's ironic because he was terrified of heights." Friends, co-workers, and even Baltimore police officials described Ray as stable and content before his disappearance. Ray even had future plans, including a move to Southern California, expanding his family. He had professional projects he was excited about. On top of that, he had actually booked an office space for a weekend during his disappearance to finish up a project, signaling no intention of unaliving himself. It's important to note, however, that in the police report, it states that the roof of the Belvedere Hotel apartment complex was, quote unquote, was accessible, and that Ray Rivera had, quote, frequented the hotel on several occasions in the past, unquote. Ray and Allison Rivera went to the Belvedere at least twice before his death to watch the sunset. When Ray left his house for the last time, he left his computer running with a website showing what time the sun would set in Baltimore that day. That is an unusual detail. So he obviously had intention to go to the hotel that afternoon if he had just searched up what time would there be a sunset today. Author Makita Brotman, who extensively researched the case, states that, quote, in 2006, when Rivera found his way to the roof, the elevator was often left unlocked, many of the fire doors were not alarmed, the security cameras didn't always work, and the bartenders at the 13th floor would go up to the roof to smoke, so the roof access door was usually left unlocked. So Brotman believes he unalived himself and knew that the rooftop well enough that unaliving himself unseen wouldn't have been difficult. So does this add to the possibility that maybe he actually did do it to himself? And one other angle alleged by Brotman is that Ray left Allison with over $90,000 of debt, which took Allison a decade after his death to pay off. Although Ray was not an employee of Stansberry and Associates at the time, where his friend and ex-employee worked at, Allison nonetheless was angry that Ray's former employer did not pay her financial compensation to cover the massive $90,000 of debt. Allison tried and failed to get a story made into a screenplay, and then she turned to Unsolved Mysteries to showcase this episode. So the author, is also spinning the angle that Allison's exaggerating everything that happened and trying to paint it in a certain way so that way she could make money off Netflix.
Okay.
Yeah. To me, I feel like the evidence to me is pretty overwhelming that he didn't unalive himself. And then this woman comes along and makes this book, and I'm skeptical of this book. I'm skeptical of this woman's motive. I'm on Allison's side. Something's off.
I wonder who this woman is.
What do you mean?
Just like the woman who wrote the book, like what's her
She's just
background?
supposedly super interested in this. But I think, here's the thing, I think she was probably hired by the people in power who want to keep this covered up to do like a hit piece and to just silence it all conveniently. Because there are some things I don't feel like she could explain away. Like what about they determine his death as technically undetermined because he wasn't consistent with a massive fall. His injuries were located more towards his right side. His personal belongings weren't smashed up. Everything that we've spoken about this, up until this point, even the fact that, his window was tampered with and his alarm went off every single night for days leading up to him suddenly disappearing. Everything's really strange here.
Yeah.
And then she comes out and is like, nah, nothing to see here. It was 100%. He was crazy, which to me, it's so easy to say with mental health stuff that you never really know someone and that could at any point have a mental breakdown and that they did it to themselves. But that to me is such a tricky line because if you've never shown any suggestion that you're going to unalive yourself, you make plans ahead, you're really positive about life, and then you just say that he had a mental breakdown and unalived himself. It seems a bit convenient, personally.
I guess $90,000 of debt could do that to a person.
But this is America, aren't we all?
Yeah.
Like debt is not something that, of its own would drive someone, and people can manage debt.
Yeah, true. Well, she did by herself.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I guess so. It's true.
Mm.
During the investigation, one compelling detail did emerge. The final phone call that Ray received was traced back to his previous employer, Stansbury and Associates Publishing. Intriguingly, no one from the company has ever come forward to claim that they were the person on the phone with Ray during that time. There have been many claims that Ray's good friend and former employer, Porter Stansbury, had raised significant suspicion due to his alleged lack of cooperation. However, other sources do say that Porter was actively involved in the search for Ray, and that he even emailed his employees on updates about the case. He mentioned working closely with the mayor's office and even praised the detectives working on the case. Additionally, Porter reached out to the local media and his entire subscriber base, providing contact details for the Baltimore Police Department and urging anyone with information to come forward. However, there were discrepancies in Porter's accounts over the years. While he initially portrayed Ray as happy, 14 years later, Porter claimed that Ray had some serious psychological issues and marital struggles, which Ray's family have strongly denied. Porter has also even claimed that Ray and Allison had attended marriage counselling, a claim which has actually been disproven by Ray's family. Also, Porter and his associate in the company, Brad, notably declined to participate in the Netflix series Unsolved Mysteries, choosing instead to address questions via interviews with the Baltimore Sun and other online platforms like Reddit. Ray's brother, how do you say his name again? Angel, expressed frustration over their delayed comments about Ray's mental state, viewing it as suspicious and unhelpful. So Ray's wife Allison believes that Ray didn't do this to himself, and she kept on telling people there's something bigger, something more to this story. During the 9 days that Ray went missing, his family scoured the home for any clue that could explain his sudden disappearance. That's when Ray's brother discovered something strange. Taped to the back of Ray's computer, sealed in plastic, was a small 3-part note. Alongside it, a blank check from Ray's production company, Zebra Productions. The note was oddly small, trimmed into 3 separate pieces. Some people have questioned whether Ray actually even wrote it himself, but according to his wife Allison, he absolutely did. Part of the note appears to be written in Ray's voice, addressing a mysterious group or council, possibly a secret society made up of some extremely powerful individuals, some of whom Ray knew personally. It included references to celebrities, movies, inventions, and names of friends and co-workers, but curiously, some important people in Ray's life were left out entirely.
All right, so we have the note up on the screen, but for those who aren't watching, I'll just read out some parts of it. It's super bizarre. He lists a whole bunch of things. It seems super random, but you can almost tell that there's something he's trying to say. So I'll read out some of them. So this is how it opens up. Brothers and sisters, right now around the world, volcanoes are erupting. What an awesome sight. Virtue and mors non separable, whom virtues unite, death will not separate. And just a note, that's apparently a Freemason tagline. Whom virtues unite, death will not separate. That a well-played game. Congratulations to all who participated. I hope you enjoyed it. But it was time to wake up, so here I am. I'd like to welcome those who accepted our invitations for membership during the game. We/I couldn't have done it without you. I look on this endeavor to find the truth, but for its own sake, it's accepting this quest for the truth, I hope to awake myself with the help of others into a man ready and worthy to receive it. Members of the council, please note that I will lend peaceful concentration to the traditional responsibilities in light of these proceedings, and I will sadly and gladly the standard request of this council within the appropriate time. So on and so forth. So it's like rambling, almost addressing someone. He lists a bunch of celebrities, and then he says, I'd like to briefly mention some movies, books, and music I found very inspired and compelling. I'd like to meet any of you who helped contribute to these works. The Matrix 1, 2, and 3, The Family Man, National Treasure, The Da Vinci Code, Eyes Wide Shut, Confessions on a Dance Floor, Demon Days. And he just keeps listing all these movies, people. It's bizarre. Sixth Sense, The Village, Signs, Unforgettable. And if you know any of these movies, they're all kind of suspenseful thrillers where there's a big twist at the end and they discover a lot of these have discovered a higher authority, especially, and a lot of people when talking about this case, especially talk about Eyes Wide Shut. Do you know the director?
Yeah, Stanley
Steve-
Kubrick.
Yeah. And how that specific movie has a lot of controversy
Well,
in and of
He
itself.
died shortly after the movie's release, and apparently during the screening, he was shouting at the executive saying, "You've changed my movie. What have you done this
Yeah.
for?" 4 days later, he dies
Yeah.
after the screening. So a lot of people think that
And like an hour or something.
an hour
is
was
like,
cut out of the movie or
yeah.
something. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
And the movie itself is super creepy. It's about a guy who just falls into this web of just elites doing weird stuff. And again, the mention of like Freemasonry. So anyway, just to paint the picture, that's the note. You can read it online if you like, or here's the note
We've got
up
it on
here.
screen now, yeah.
Yeah, but that's kind of the gist of it. It's very bizarre.
So the first line in this note caught Alison's attention immediately. It said, "Whom virtue unites, death cannot separate." So this is as we said before, this is linked with the Freemasons,
Yeah.
which is a secret society, as many people will know. On the day he disappeared, he also bought Freemasons for Dummies and called a local lodge to inquire about membership.
That's not a coincidence.
No, that's not coincident at all.
But is that a sign of a psychotic break?
No. I don't think so. Maybe it is, I don't know. It's hard
But
to say.
Freemasons are an actual organization.
Yeah.
But the Freemasons for Dummies. I saw that and laughed.
The representative described the call as completely normal, but the timing, along with Ray's sudden deep dive into Masonic literature, has fueled countless conspiracy theories online about whether or not secret societies played a role in his death. The note hinted that Ray had seen or learned something disturbing, something he wished he could unsee, which is maybe why he wrote down Eyes Wide Shut. Funnily enough, when you mentioned the note to me, I was like, I wonder if he wrote down Eyes Wide Shut on the movie list. And he did.
Yeah.
Which is almost like too cliche.
Yeah.
I was like, I bet he's written that down if he's listed some movies.
Yeah. And you also mentioned The Game, which is another one frequently talked about, because again, it's about this guy who falls into like a game and he just manages to survive. So there seems to be a theme here.
Yeah.
Something that's somehow connected.
Well, there's another theory what people have brought up is, of course, Ray was a screenwriter.
Yeah.
So was this just a little screenplay? He was writing down some details, volcanoes, movie inspirations that he wanted to
Exactly.
which that makes sense, I guess, to some degree. Some people have said the tone of the note feels cinematic, like a speech from a secret society-themed movie. Like Eyes Wide Shut, National Treasure, The Matrix, The Game. There's always a little secret element to it.
And a lot of people, and I believe Alison did mention that that's how he writes. He's kind of one of those free consciousness, you just write out just almost like gibberish, but you're trying to capture the essence of like some kind of creative endeavor. People just get consumed by the art, and that's a common way apparently that some writers do write when they're starting off an idea. So that could have been it. So as you said, writing a screenplay, possibly.
Do you want to do the next one?
So one theory that's made the rounds, as I mentioned, was specifically the mention of David Fincher's 1997 thriller, The Game. So in it, get this, the main character is unknowingly forced into a real-life game orchestrated by a shadowy group. In the final act, he jumps off a roof and crashes through a glass ceiling, only to find out it was all staged. Some have suggested Ray may have believed he was living out something similar, but Allison and investigators say there's no special emphasis on the game in Ray's note. He was a movie buff. This was just one of the many films he referenced. But that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's very strange, yeah. So if he did have a psychotic break, maybe he thought he was like living in like a little bit of a movie scenario.
Yeah. And then like was like trying to play out one of his favorites. And it's all kind of like, I'm a part of, and he's just like kind of convinced himself he's a part of something greater. Hence why he also disappeared on the day he wanted to join a Masonic group. Like that kind of gives an essence of like maybe someone's going through something, but nothing else in his life seemed to indicate that, unless it is he actually did tumble into something and wanted to investigate more. So then on that point, could it have actually been that he unalived himself? So some have claimed that this note may have been a quote unquote done it to himself kind of note, because people, before you unalive yourself, you leave like a goodbye note. That's very common in those cases. So could this have possibly been it? So Allison doesn't believe it was. She said, quote, Ray was a brilliant writer. If he had written a note, it would have been beautiful. This wasn't that. And I agree. It doesn't look like that. In fact, also the FBI agreed. Their behavioral analysis unit examined the note and determined it wasn't an unaliving letter. It lacked the usual emotional tone, expressions of despair, or messages of goodbye typically found in such notes. However, that said, their report did raise questions The report said, or concluded, that, quote, the writer of the letter likely suffers from persecutory delusional disorder, and that, quote, the writing in this letter is also consistent with someone who suffers from a bipolar disorder. This assumption is based on the flight of ideas that could have been written by someone experiencing an untreated manic episode. The writing in this letter is disorganized, and to a lesser extent, it is consistent with someone who suffers from schizophrenia. End of quote. The FBI also explained that, quote, in this particular case, the mental illness suffered by the author of the letter may go virtually undetected by family, friends, and co-workers, end quote. The FBI further suggested that family members should be re-interviewed regarding his mental health. So maybe it is possible. Maybe he was having a manic episode, and according to the FBI, maybe it could have gone unnoticed, but that's pretty massive. Schizophrenia is not something that just goes unnoticed by family. He was completely normal in all other regards, had all this crazy other stuff happening around him.
Can it trigger at some point, though? It can just come.
So we've just gotten Josh to look it up. So schizophrenia can happen early 20s to early 30s, right, Josh? Yeah. So possibility. But again, do people who manifest, and don't they, it builds up and then... I don't know. I'm not a mental health expert.
If you know, let us know.
Yeah, yes, please. Leave it down below. It's, to me, the essence, I genuinely believe that he discovered something, which we'll get into the employer situation and the company he was a part of. But I think he discovered something which then led him into the belief that there are an elite group of people that are connected financially that have some kind of like power over citizens, right? That there is like an Illuminati, that there is a big group of people or something. And then that triggered him to really want to investigate who these people are, go look into Freemasonry, and that group of people figured that out and took him out before he said anything.
Well, he was working with, I guess, some people involved in finances, and if they're moving around large sums of money, they're obviously influential and powerful.
Yes. Well, let's get to that. So before we get into the employer, just quickly, one of the eeriest details that came out after Ray's computer was taken into police custody was that when Allison called wanting to retrieve the computer, a detective told her something really unsettling. Someone had repeatedly called trying to pick it up. No one ever explained who was making those calls or why they wanted Ray's computer so badly. My guess is obviously something was on that computer and someone knew that there was something on that computer that could not go out to the public and they wanted it. There's no other explanation for that. Who would so desperately want Ray's computer and never confess to that?
Such an eerie little detail, that bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that leads us to the employer. What was this corporation that we keep alluding to? So it's called Agora. That's the main company that he was a part of. So when Ray and his fiancée Allison moved to Baltimore in 2004, they probably didn't realize just how deep the rabbit hole would go. On the surface, Ray was simply taking a job with a financial newsletter company run by his old friend Porter Stansbury, which we've mentioned. But the company and the ecosystem it belonged to was anything but simple. Agora Publishing started out as a newsletter called International Living. It attracted readers who were into international travel, smart investing, and just generally avoiding taxes. Over time, however, Agora exploded into a sprawling media empire with dozens of specialized newsletters. One of them was called The Strategic Investor, and this one predicted a future dominated by digital currencies, what they call digital cash, the decline of nation states, and a global elite that would chase tax shelters and legal loopholes across the world. By 2004, Agora and all of its spin-offs were under the microscope. The authorities had been eyeing them for years due to very suspicious activities, including many suspicious trades and even activity relating to 9/11. Just days before 9/11, an Agora editor had faxed out a stock tip predicting trouble for United and American Airlines. How did they know that? Ultimately, in 2005, the authorities, the SEC, slammed the company for spreading false insider tips, and the company had to pay a fine and then rebranded as what we know now as Stansbury and Associated Investments Research. So after all that mess, Ray switched roles and began creating videos for a different company called the Oxford Club, but this was still an affiliate of that old Agora. The Oxford Club, however, traced its roots back to a really phony investment group which involved a scam claiming they could turn beach sand into gold. And it's in this shady company that Ray spent his final months. So basically, the original big Agora company is super shady, has all these links to possibly 9/11 and false insider trading tips. And a big specialty of them was talking about elites and how they move money around, tax loopholes, and super suspect. And then the fact that he then moves to another company still associated with Agora, but even that little company has all this shady scam background. Like, it's all sus and super sketchy. And then on the day that he disappears, he gets a phone call, someone being like, they must have triggered something, because he says, oh my goodness, and sprints out of his house. And on that earlier that day, he's calling up to join the Freemasons.
We still don't know who made that phone call.
Yeah, they linked it. They think they linked it back to the
company.
Yeah, to the company.
They have no idea who was on the phone.
No. But that's a big one. The company called him and he picks up, goes, oh my goodness, oh shit, and then sprints out of there.
That's such. I feel like if you knew who was on the phone to, that's almost like the piece of the puzzle that could really help solve.
Yes.
Because then you said, what did he say to him? What made him say, oh shit? Because obviously, if he did have a psychotic break, whatever was said on the phone might have just triggered that off.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
These people are coming after you right now. You need to leave.
Yeah.
I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
Either way, it's a real.
Yeah. And he didn't work there anymore. He didn't work at Porter and Stan, with his his friend Porter. He didn't work with him anymore. It was technically associated, but not quite. So why was Porter calling for him? His old company, that's really suspect.
Yeah.
Why is he giving him a call? And then remember, days before he disappeared, the animal, quote unquote, triggering off the alarm, and him being super paranoid. He must have figured something out. It could be as simple as, hey, I found out that there's this other, because clearly this company is scammy. There's another scam happening right now. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. One of the leading, which we'll discuss further, but one of the theories is, what if he called Porter and was like, one of his own, hey, I've just discovered, I'm looking in this newsletter, writing this thing, and I've just discovered something big. Turns out the company we're working for is super shady, and then calls Porter, or like Porter might call him to discuss that point, and he has to rush out to discuss it with them. Like, I feel like maybe he did discover something. This is a shady company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very shady.
So just to summarize, because this was actually that point that I just made, I'm just going to read it out fully just to make it clear. So this was based on Reddit. So this is this Redditor's theory. He's a writer and he's investigating. He found something from his friend's company. Ray thought he could talk to his friend Porter about it, but Porter freaked out and called someone powerful within the company. Those people, or just Porter, made sure cameras were not on and knew which blind spots to use when people were walking around. This could have been planned weeks ahead. Porter or someone powerful in the company calls Ray. To his surprise, obviously Ray says, oh shit, and runs out. These people tell Ray by phone where to go and park, gave instructions to meet at the hotel, at the apartments, the Belvedere, and how to enter the rooftop without detection. They speak to Ray about what he knows, knowing Ray wanted to do good and let the story out. They panicked and chased down Ray, dragging him by the edge. His sandals, his flip-flops had drag marks on them. They broke his shins. They picked him up. If there was a group, possibly they all, picked him up, and they swung him off the roof. And then they kind of like set the scene afterwards. So this Redditor's theory is that maybe, and I'm inclined now to think this, he discovered something and then the company took him out and then staged the scene. And whoever this company and the people they're associated with are so powerful, they could effectively get the hotel staff in it because no one saw him. The cameras weren't happened to be malfunctioning that day. The lead investigator was taken off the case because he said, hey, there's something here, but no one, what did he say?
He said something along the lines of there's some people involved who might not want you to know.
That's right.
Don't dig too deep because the people involved don't want you to know, and then all of a sudden he's taken off the case.
Yeah, there have to be powerful people involved to do that.
We've seen this before as well with other cases. Jonathan Luna, where something weird happens, the investigators believe something contrary to what the narrative is, and they get taken off the case.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
Those are very suspicious cases.
Yeah. So that's one theory, and that's the one I'm inclined to believe.
Yeah. It's the oh shit that gets me when he says oh shit and then runs.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what's been said there? And also, during the police investigation, I'm guessing they asked the company who called him,
Yeah.
who was on the phone to him, and no one came
No.
forward. If there was nothing to hide, you'd be like, yeah, I phoned him.
Exactly.
And I said something like, oh, the stocks that you've covered again have gone down. And you go, oh shit.
Yeah.
But then why did he run out? Because there could be an innocent explanation to it.
Yes.
But there also could be a sinister one.
Yeah.
If it's innocent, then you'd come forward and say, yeah, I spoke to him. Just told him that his stocks, what he's written about, are down again. So he's done a bad job.
Yeah.
Which apparently he'd done a few times.
Yeah.
But obviously he said, oh shit, ran. And
Yeah.
there was the shit activity before. He was going outside with a baseball bat.
Yeah, he was super paranoid in those couple of days, and for good reason. Someone at 1 a.m.-ish every night for several nights kept trying to get into his house.
Yeah.
He was on edge. I think he discovered something that, like I said, I think he discovered something and was like, they're going to come after me. And they did. And then the whole thing's been covered up. That's what I think. But
I think so too.
But what do you think about the hole? So one of the main things was, I think that, and this is what people were saying online, that he was beaten up in person or ran over by a car. Remember those two experts earlier on? They had mentioned it looks more like he was hit by a car or beaten up, because the injuries are primarily to the right side of his body. It's not like consistent with an actual really, fall. I think they probably beat him, ran him over, some kind of escalation, and then they set up the scene. They probably knew that there was a hole beforehand because there was no DNA on the hole. What if they just planted him inside the room and then scattered his stuff to make it look like, that hole there, let's just pretend that he jumped off that.
It would explain why they didn't take any photographs of the crime scene, the police, if it was a cover-up too. Because if it was a hole that wasn't made by a human being falling through it, I think a photograph might be conclusive proof that, that hole's been there before or something like that. Yeah, what a weird case.
Do you think
God,
he jumped? And another one was like, maybe they beat him up, had him in a helicopter. So in terms of he didn't actually jump, because that's really unlikely that he jumped. Maybe they just pushed him off the helicopter and he fell through. That's like another one. But what do you think? Do you think he fell through the hole?
I feel like a helicopter and pushing someone off is so in view of everything.
Yeah.
And there's also flight details of a helicopter. So if it was a helicopter, you're basically dobbing yourself in big time, because you can check flight records and
For
stuff.
sure.
So I don't think it's that. If it was that, it'd be very
I think
silly.
he fell through the hole. There was no DNA on it, on the hole.
Yeah, I think that hole might have been there before.
Yeah. And apparently
don't know
the
what
hole, you couldn't see it from the apartments. It was kind of like, if you knew it was there, then you already knew. It could have been there for weeks. It wasn't like in plain view for everyone to see.
Well, it wasn't a room that people checked, hence why he was in there for a while and no one knew.
Exactly.
So it's obviously a room that didn't get much attention and care. If there was a hole there, probably wasn't probably a priority to fix it. I think he's done. I think part of me wonders if he's because he's a writer and he's into movies and stuff. He wanted to catch like a story or something. Maybe found something interesting, started to write about it, dug a bit deeper, and I think he's pissed off some people. Hence why the police didn't take photographs. Hence why there's people involved maybe who have covered it up, and the investigator said there's people involved here who don't want this out there. I think there's a lot of things that line up here. That was an absolute cover up.
Yeah,
that's my personal opinion.
Same, but a lot of people, when they discuss this case, they think, no, he had a psychotic break. Which is so weird. I don't see I don't see that, because there's too many unusual things that don't line up with that theory.
If it was a psychotic break, why weren't his glasses broken? Why wouldn't his? I mean, if it's a Nokia, explain why it wasn't broken. But why? There should be some damage to it, I guess, even from that height. Why did the investigators say that? Why were people trying to get in? Why were animals setting off alarms the 2 days before?
Yeah. He was afraid of heights.
Why did he say, oh shit? Why did he jump from a height?
Yeah.
There's so many things. There are a lot of cases where things are open and shut, and there's always discrepancies. Yeah. Things don't always line up. But there's too many things that don't really make it 100%. Simple.
Yeah.
So I'm inclined to think maybe he's pissed someone off, or he worked in finance. There's a lot of people in finance who are shady. That's not.
I mean, the company knew about 911 basically happening before it did, because they gave an insider tip that, hey, American Airlines is going to be in trouble. Pull your stocks out. That was apparently a thing that this company did. And you think about Epstein, you think about
he was a financier working in big investments and stuff.
That was apparently his career. He was in finance.
Even if he's just given tips about what to trade in and he's got it completely wrong and lost people a lot of money, if he's involved in finance, because he's always if you piss off people and you're losing the money, he's not a hedge fund manager, but he's obviously writing about certain things. I don't know, but
he wanted to get out of the industry.
Yeah,
and he wanted to get into creative writing. He was sick of finance writing. Maybe he was just like, this is my way to get out. Maybe I can find the
break
inside
a big
scoop.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And launch my career, or who knows. But
God,
like the
whatever happened to him?
family,
What a mysterious case.
yeah. But the family are all like, absolutely,
Yeah.
he did not unalive himself. He was so sound of mind. And again, for me, anytime people are like, yeah, it was just a psychotic break, let's brush it under the rug. That is always a red flag, because I'm like, that's such an easy. I mean, obviously, sometimes that probably is the case, but there's too much going on here.
Well, they said Jonathan Luna had a psychotic break. I mean,
That's
could be
what I
Jonathan Luna. Yeah, it's
mean.
just a psychotic break. Yeah,
Yeah.
did
it to
things to
himself.
himself that don't really make any sense anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating case. My God.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What do you guys think?
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing, reading through your comments and getting your perspective.
Yeah, it's fun, right? Yeah. Yeah, when people have a go at you for saying you go into a hotel room and help someone.
I'm still annoyed. I'm like, as if you wouldn't.
But yeah, thank you for watching, guys. Let us know about the theories, what you think below and all that. It's always interesting to read what people think.
Yeah, I heard if I can find out who did it, I'll put it up. But one lady was saying from last week that what if the body that was discovered, the Oslo Plaza woman, what if that wasn't the person who checked in at all? What if that was the assassin and they killed her and that was a body discovered? That's got nothing to do with the person who checked in.
That'd be interesting.
I'm like, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
So I love it. Please leave your opinions down below. It's the best bit.
Yeah, it's like a little personalized Reddit page for us. Yes! Just reading people's things like that. So it's quite fun.
And I just sit there do. I didn't think of that. Yeah.
It's very fun. So yeah, thank you for watching if you made it this far. And take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Subscribe. Yeah, his voice is horrible on camera.
Oh, really?
Fucking horrible. Sounds nothing like him in real life. His voice goes on like really aliens.
No.
Sounds like a crackhead a little bit. It's weird.
You do mumble a bit.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
I'm a mumbler, but I guess I'm just loud. Everything's blurry. Yeah.